Unbroken, the podcast with Madeline Black. Healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeline Black, where I'm speaking to people that have overcome adversity and they haven't just bounced back in life, they have bounced forward and transformed their life and are really thriving now. And my guest today is no exception. So Stephen Dowd committed to get fit and agreed to compete in a charity cycling event. He bought a bike, started training and rode to work like thousands of others. Early one summer morning, he was headed to a friend's flat to do the daily commute together, but he never arrived. A freak accident completely changed the path of his life. He now shares his unlikely journey of recovery and how he has approached his situation to achieve the greatest successes to date. Please welcome Stephen Dowd. Hi there, nice to have you on. How are you doing?
Hi Madeline, yeah, lovely to be on, thank you. I'm doing very well, very well.
Good. So the first question that I ask everyone, because the podcast is called Unbroken, is what does that word mean to you?
It's a great one. I think you're right, it's got different meanings for different people. In my case, my broken world started about 4.5 years ago when I quite literally broke my neck. And unfortunately I was paralyzed from the middle of my neck down. So physically unbroken to me means my inability to do the things that I did before in that way, but equally I guess there's a mental element to that as well that we all could potentially relate to, and how we get through the mental anguish of broken lives.
And I didn't realize it was only 4.5 years ago that you've had your accident, because you've done so much in that time. I just assumed it was a long time ago. And can you tell us a little bit about that day? What happened?
Yeah, sure. So as I say, it was summer 2016. I was training for Ride London, the bike ride. Did you know that one? Yeah, it's a charity bike ride, 100 miles. They shut down the roads in London. You kind of go around the major landmarks, and I was training for that event. So I was heading down to a friend's house, and as I say, bright and early, 6:30 in the morning, totally normal day. You know,
Not much traffic about.
No, it's fine, and there's nothing remarkable about it at all. And I went down to his place, and unfortunately wasn't traveling quickly, just 8 miles an hour. I hit a barrier that I just didn't see. I went over the top of that barrier, and as I landed on my head, then I immediately sustained a spinal cord injury at the level of C3-4. So you've got 7 bones in your neck, mine's bang in the middle of those. And in less than a heartbeat, I lost everything below that point, arms, legs, everything in between.
And were you aware of this straight away? You had no feeling?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I lost everything below that point, but what I didn't lose was consciousness. Mm-hmm. So I was awake throughout this entire process. And but what I'd done initially was smash my face into the ground. So as I hit the ground really hard, I had, you know, like when you run into a wall or you're involved in sports maybe or something, and you have that impact, and it kind of leaves you a bit dazed, you know, seeing stars. And I kind of felt a little bit like that. And it was only when I reached up to my face to kind of rub the bit that hurt and went, ow, that really stings, that nothing happened.
And were you able to call for help, or somebody came to your aid?
I did call out. I tried to call out, and initially, and again, because of the level of my injury affecting my diaphragm and my lungs. So when I tried to call out, when I realized that something was really bad and I couldn't touch my face and I couldn't move my arms and legs, when I did try and call out, nothing really happened. I had that nightmarish scene, you know, where you try and scream and nothing happens. That was my reality for a second, and that was really scary in itself. So you can imagine the panic rising in that moment. So I mustered all I could and I tried it again. And although a bit more air came out with a little bit of noise this time, I was very lucky that even though it's 6:30 in the morning, I was down by the Thames. There weren't many people around. There happened to be a couple of runners that were really nearby. They were, I don't know, less than 100 meters away. And they'd seen me cycling, it turns out, we found out later. And then they heard the crash. So they come running over just at that moment where I called out for help. So they were able to kind of help me from there.
Amazing, you know, synchronicity that they were there at that time. So you're then sent to hospital and you're operated on, I guess, straight away.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I was very lucky because, well, luck is relative, I guess. But yeah, I was the luckiest, unlucky guy that day. And in as much as I happened to have my injury in London, where I live, they happened to be running a experimental clinical research trial in St George's Hospital, which wasn't far away. So when I was scooped up, I was taken off in the ambulance, taken to the hospital. I was given the various MRIs, X-rays, all that sort of stuff that you have when you have an injury. And I had a very honest conversation with my consultant who said, Steve, your injury is just so devastating. We don't know what you're going to get back, if anything. I was at 37 years old. I was facing.
How was that to
total
hear
paralysis.
that? I know you had a very real and raw conversation with your wife, saying that I'm going to be a burden to you. I can't live like this. Take me to Switzerland, basically.
Yeah, no, literally those words were used. And so we had a very honest conversation, and it was an agreement more so than a statement. So I said to Helen, if I'm going to be driving around in a power chair with my mouth forever, like potentially another 40 years, I don't want that for me. You know, that's not the life I'd planned. And whilst I'm very careful to say that, because some people do live very full lives with that very same injury, and it's all very personal and unique.
That's how you personally felt at the time. That was your truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, see, for me, it was just not a good enough prognosis for me to want to continue along that line. And I had a conversation with Helen, and I said, I don't want this for me for these reasons, but equally, I don't want it for you either. Right? Well, you're my wife, and having you wipe my ass for 40 years is not really going to be good enough for us either. He didn't sign up to this. And so we agreed that if that was going to be the outcome, then yeah, I'd book a one-way ticket to Switzerland and call it a day.
But they sent you to St. George, the hospital, just along the way, and you had quite experiential operation. It was quite new, wasn't it?
Very much so, yeah. The experimental clinical trial that I was enrolled on was called iScope, under a guy called Professor Papadopoulos. And it was only I was one of 50 people. So they had funding for just 50 people to go through this particular type of surgery for this particular type of injury, to see if they could save some of the nervous tissue, and in doing so, hopefully improve people's prognosis and maybe even allow them to walk and move again, far more than most spinal cord injury outcomes or prognoses have today. So yeah, I was taken under the knife within 24 hours of my injury, and I popped out the other side in intensive care. That was the only time I did lose consciousness, was through the surgery itself, which I had lots of PTSD stuff to deal with later as a result.
But without this operation, you would have been quadriplegic.
I mean, technically, I am quadriplegic, in as much as quadriplegia or tetraplegia is the same thing, different words for the same thing, means that you're affected in all four limbs. And so technically I still am. I'm still paralyzed in my hands, and I still have some issues, although I'm far and away an outlier to most people that have a level of recovery from tetraplegia or from
you would have been more paralyzed if you hadn't had this operation.
I would be an urn on a fireplace having visited Switzerland if I hadn't had this operation. So we wouldn't be having this conversation, quite literally. I put down my recovery, not just to one thing. It's never the case, right? There's always a whole bunch of stuff that comes into play when you go through not just an injury like mine, but anybody's personal story. I mean, I'm sure your listeners will have their 9 out of 10 challenge, and whatever it is that they go through, they'll have had to have used more than one thing and one person and one scene to improve. And mine was no different. But I would say that the surgery was absolutely an anchor point for me to start a recovery process that I think I wouldn't have done otherwise. And then you layer that with friends and family, hydration, nutrition, bloody-minded determination to get it done as well. You
were very determined, because people can go and watch the videos of you, see the news reports where you're having your physical therapy and you say out loud, what is the date? 200 days from now. 200 days from now, I'm going to be walking. And you were so determined, and you did walk. It was amazing to watch that video.
Yeah, it was an intense moment, actually. That was the culmination of a promise, actually. So on day 2 in intensive care, I'd made that promise to Helen, just privately, between the two of us. I'd said that.
Wow. Yeah,
I said, I mean, I was a head on a pillow, right? My prognosis was, you're going to potentially, you've had this surgery, but there's no promises made. We can't make it we can't promise we can make it better, but we can't promise we can't make it any worse. So why not have a go? But yeah, on day 2, I still couldn't move. But I looked across to Helen, just a pair of eyes and a pillow, and said to Helen, 200 days from now, what's that? She said, it's December the 22nd. Why's that? I said, give me Christmas Day and I'll be back to normal. And that was my promise to Helen, that I was going to, and to myself, that I was going to make that recovery and not just be better, but be like 100% better was my plan.
And what did that take? How did you dig in to get that grit, that determination, that resilience to achieve that?
It's an interesting question, and it's one that I ponder a lot because I speak myself, actually, do professional speaking on challenge, forced change, and crisis resilience particularly. And grit and determination obviously is closely aligned to all of those things. There isn't a right or wrong answer to it, but I don't believe that resilience is necessarily something you learn. I think resilience is something you have, and you have different keys to open it in different ways at different times in your life. So was I resilient previously? Well, I had a level of resilience. I'd had some experiences, some of which were great, some of which were more challenging, and I'd learned some things, but none of which were on a scale of what I had to face here. But I'd been able to learn some skills which I could then transfer across, and I could unlock at the time when I needed them. But would you have asked me would I have responded in the way that I did before my injury? My answer would have been, God, no. That would have been somebody else that does that sort of thing. And it's only when you're in that situation that you just don't realize how strong you are until it's your only option. And at that point, you dig in and you unlock what you need to get to that resilience that you need, or not. I think the tools can be learned. I don't think resilience itself can be learned.
Mm-hmm. But you just day 2 then in intensive care came up with these 200 days, and your therapy team, they supported that? That was a possibility, or did they think, oh, he's not going to do that?
Oh, I had a bit of both.
Yeah,
I had a bit of both. I had some naysayers, and not that they were naysayers because they necessarily didn't believe it, but I think there was an element of the litigious nature of recovery and hospitalization, is that they don't want to give you false hope. If they say you can do things and then you can't, and then suddenly there's a lawsuit involved. And I think people get scared of that. And it's a real shame, because one of the biggest assets that you have when you're in a position where you can't move your arms and legs, in my case, but in others, you've got your own scenario. Hope is one of your biggest assets, right? Being able to be gifted hope, or to have hope taken away, are massive, massive deals for people. So I did have some people that basically said, yeah, you'll be careful. There was lots of be careful warnings. And to me, what be careful said really was, I don't think you can do it. So don't, but I'm not going to be able to stop you. So don't hurt yourself, because this could get dangerous for everyone. And I respect that to a degree. But I would say the flip side of it as well is that I had some incredible people who, particularly in my trauma physio team in intensive care. So I spent 4 months in hospital, 2 months at St George's, 2 months in rehabilitation. But those first 2 months and those first few days really were crucial, because they kept testing me. They kept, almost between them, they were saying that, I wonder what he can do. I wonder where he can go. Right? Because I had that determination and a willingness to embrace it. They didn't often get people with my level of injury that had that level of determination and a willingness to do it. So I was spending literally every moment of every day working on desperately trying to move. It all started with a twitch on my left thumb, right? No one's going to move around their entire life twitching their thumb, but it has to start somewhere. And I took that as a win. And then I celebrated all these little wins every day. But with people, it was really important to have the team behind me saying, right, okay, let's just push him as far as he can go. And I remember one conversation with, so I've moved hospitals now, I'm in month 3, and I'm over at Stanmore, which is a rehabilitation hospital. And I speak to Vish, who is my newly qualified physio. He's only been qualified for less than a year. And I said to him, Vish, have you ever had anyone get 100% better? Because I've got a promise here that I need to fulfill on. So have you ever got anyone that's 100% better? And he said, no, not yet. I said, okay, I'm going to be your first. So if you give me 100% of your effort, I'll give you 100% of mine, and we'll get there together. And we made this little pact that that would be the case. And he did. He went above and beyond, and he booked me into illicit physio sessions in gyms I shouldn't have been in, and all sorts of stuff, which I probably shouldn't say out loud. But he doesn't work at the hospital anymore. He works for a cricket team. But he had that determination.
You never lost faith. You were always driven. You never thought halfway through, oh, maybe I can't do this, or maybe I've promised too much. But you were always driven, though.
No, well, no. We all have that moment, right? We all have that little inner voice that says, really, are you taking on too much here? Are you being realistic? Can you really do this? I tend to punch that little voice in the face quite a lot, because he's right here on my shoulder, and he's there all the time, and he always was there even before the injury. That's probably quite common for a lot of people that are listening to this. I'd imagine they have their kind of devils and angels, as it were.
Yes.
And it's not that I didn't listen to him, but I had to not follow what was happening. in that voice. I had to almost deny it. So you hear it and it's definitely there, but it was something I had to shut down and say, I'm sorry, that's not welcome, because I need to move forwards in a different way. I couldn't have anchors that were holding me back. And that became quite challenging, actually. Even my wife and I don't talk about this a lot, but my wife and I had some very honest conversations about her response to my injury, because spinal cord injury in my case, or in like I say, I keep harking back to anybody's injury or anybody's challenge, doesn't just affect the person that it affects, it affects everyone around them.
Isn't it?
Oh, it's a massive rock in the pond. So everyone around you will suffer in their own way, in whatever way that is. And Helen's suffering was no different with the spinal cord injury. Right? She had her own challenges. She'd lost her husband in the way that he was. She couldn't own my body anymore in the way that she had. She couldn't even touch me because I had such hypersensitivity. Even just to touch me was like electric shocks, and it was hideous. But we had a very honest conversation, because sometimes her mindset wasn't allowing her to move forwards. She didn't have that same I'm going to do it anyway mentality that I had.
She had a doubt.
She did sometimes, and I think a lot of it came out of fear and anxiety and loss and grief and all that sort of stuff. But very selfishly, I couldn't have that in my life. At that moment, I couldn't. It became an anchor for me, stopping moving forward at the pace at which I was moving forwards, because I was so worried about where Helen was and having to kind of slow down to allow her to catch up a little. And it was really difficult, that part, actually, because I felt as though I was not moving as far forward as I could, because I was taking someone else with me. But oh my God, I'm really glad we did that, because naturally Helen has been my rock throughout this whole process as well, right? She has her own challenges. Even today, we both have our own challenges with something that happened 4.5 years ago. But as you know, and as I know your listeners know, because it was 4.5 years ago means nothing. It's just a date in the diary, right? How you deal with it is the issue, and how well you deal with it.
Absolutely. So what we also see on the news clip that I watched of you is just a few days later, it was Christmas Day, and you were determined to walk the turkey into the room, and we see you coming in with your turkey, and that must have just been amazing for everybody there to witness that.
Yeah, it was.
To carry the turkey into the room, not just for them to witness.
Yeah, it was pretty. It was a remarkable moment, and it was an intense time. Where we'd spent 6 months, and 200 days is about 6 months, right? So we'd spent a good 6 months in that sort of rocky montage, going from twitching a thumb to doing all sorts of stuff, normally incrementally. So nobody makes these massive leaps necessarily, but it's day by day gains, and it was celebrations of daily gains. That was the fuel that kept this going. I had a gold medal level goal, like a bold, ambitious goal, but it was the daily wins that got us there, just step by step, quite literally in the end. But yeah, so 200 days later, Christmas Day, my house, 2016. I'm standing in the kitchen on my own, actually, and I'd kind of planned to do this, and I wanted to do this myself. But I'm standing there on my own, and I move across to pick up the turkey, with the platter with the turkey on it. I remember thinking, oh my God, this is so heavy.
Don't drop it.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have great hand function. My arms weren't particularly strong.
Sorry, turkey's off.
Yeah, that's the one thing you don't want to do on Christmas Day, right? Is drop the bird. But we had about 25 people in the room next door, and I could feel the weight of this turkey, and I could smell it right in front of me, and I could hear the people not being noisy next door and laughing and joking. And I did shed a little tear for myself at that point, just thinking, I've made it. I've got here. And I did, very gingerly, but very definitely under my own steam, shuffled this turkey into the front room, or into the dining room, and yeah, to celebrate with my family, something that I promised not only to myself and to Helen, but to everybody around me. So
it was beautiful to watch. It was a lovely moment to witness from a viewer's point of view as well. Even if you don't know anything about your story, you couldn't not be moved. And really, since your recovery, you've now kind of, I guess, you're giving back in another way.
So yeah, I mean, after that particular event, the 200 days promise, it became known as, I made a promise to the internet on Boxing Day. So I had a day off because I'd been working bloody hard, right? But I had a day off, and I was doing what self-respecting boys do, and I was watching the Bond film with my cornflakes with Baileys on it and all that sort of stuff. And I promised the internet through Facebook, actually, which is before I told my wife, which is always a bad idea. Never do it in that order. But I told the internet that I was going to get back on the same bike that I fell from, the very same bike that I had my injury on, and I was going to cycle the 100 miles, the equivalent of the Ride London that I never got to do.
That you started, or that you hadn't actually completed yet because you were training for it.
Exactly that. And so that 100 miles cycle was really important to me, and to be on the same bike. I'm laughing now because I'm looking at it right in front of me. It's even got the same broken brake lever on the left hand side where it hit the barrier. So I set about what became known as the 200 days challenge, and again, there's another rocky montage. I was doing 5 hours a day in physio for another 200 days, until eventually the same day as Ride London, the year after the one that I should have done, I was at Red Bull headquarters. I had my bike up on what's called a turbo trainer. So it's effectively, you replace your back wheel.
Upstairs with my husband.
Oh, you've got a turbo, cool.
Yes.
So yeah, you replace the back wheel effectively. And so you static cycle in one place as if you were on the road. And so I started riding, and again, long story short, I found myself on Zwift, which is a virtual cycling environment, like a video game for cyclists. And I cycled the 100 miles that I didn't get to do. And not only did I come in less than 6 hours I'd promised the world, but I came in at 5 hours, 59 minutes and 40 seconds.
Pushing it a bit close, really, wasn't it?
It was a bit of a Hollywood ending, I've got to say. There was a moment where even I went, hold on. My little inner critic, the guy that I normally punch in the face, was very loud between the last couple of minutes of that ride.
But what must it have felt like to actually complete that 100 miles on the same bike that nearly stopped you from doing that?
Absolutely. I mean, it was very important to me to do it on that bike for lots of reasons, but not least because I had the injury on the same machine. So yeah, it was an incredible moment again as I crossed the line. I didn't even realise that I'd crossed the line until the rest of the people in the room kind of raised this cheer. I had my head down and I was just pumping my little chicken legs to see if I could get over the line as quickly as possible. And it's only when I looked up I realised that I'd done it and I'd beaten the time that I'd intended. So.
It's brilliant. And you now do other sporting events to raise awareness and to raise money. And
I do. So I became a little bit addicted to challenge, and the reason that that was the case, I'm just fascinated by what challenge did for me, but also what it does for other people. And we all live in that comfortable middle, right? We all live in this kind of central zone, and rightly so, because understandably so, because that's where we're comfortable. You don't necessarily have to move out of that space, and you can live a totally comfortable life. But I'm really interested in that bit where you move to the edges. When you get to the sides of your screen in a Zoom call, when you kind of step into that red zone, that 100% area, I think you can really learn a lot about yourself, things that maybe you didn't think were possible.
Say that a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing really ever grows there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
When we go to the edge, we do grow. It does challenge us.
Yeah, no, and I think the comfort zone is a really useful place. Don't get me wrong. That's like my safe space, right? You want to go there when you need to rest and recuperate. And it's a bit like sleep for me, being in that comfortable space where you're just going through the motions and you just recharge a little. But I'm really interested not there. I'm interested in the edges, those kind of the edges of the bell curve, that 10% either side. And in my studies of challenge and in meeting people that have been through challenge and meeting people that have been through forced change like I had, and the resilience that they developed in crisis situations often, why is that different, and how do you unlock it, and what does it look like, what does it feel like, what does it taste like, really sort of viscerally, where does it live? And so I became a bit addicted to challenge, and I set up a few other challenges for people to do that wasn't about Steve and Steve's recovery, etc. necessarily, but I was able to set them up in situations where they could do their own thing in a group setting. So we did another cycle. We put people on watt bikes, which is effectively an indoor cycle.
I know watt bikes. Yes, I've seen them in the gym.
So they are beasts.
I see them on them dripping, and I avoid those.
Absolutely. Well, we put 15 of those in Red Bull headquarters, and we got teams to cycle either individually or as a team, sharing the 100-mile distance. So a replication of the event that I did the previous year, but for other people on a wider basis. Between those two events, we raised nearly £50,000 for Wings for Life, a spinal cord injury foundation, which funded the experimental intervention that I had. So Wings for Life are very close to my heart, and so I like to kind of be the ambassador for them wherever I can. And all the fundraising activity that I do is for them, because I'd love to see them move forwards in the extreme way that they do. And when I say that, what I mean is that my level of recovery and my interest is about bold, ambitious goals. And they have one single bold, ambitious goal, and that's to find a cure for spinal cord injury paralysis. They're not putting people in better houses or adapting their wheelchairs. Other groups do that, and they do that very well. but Wings for Life are very specifically about trying to find a cure for that paralysis. So I'm utterly supportive in that. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So utterly supporting them. And and I did a few other things. So I learned to ski for the first time, which was a bit crazy.
You hadn't skied before your accident?
No.
Oh.
No. So skidding off a mountain, what can possibly go wrong, right? It's, controlled skidding. But yeah, I fell over every 6 feet for about a week. It was just ridiculous.
That's normal anyway. Actually, I always think, I haven't skied for a long time. I think the first time you go is actually the best time, because you fall over so much and everyone else is falling over in the beginner's class. So it's actually quite fun if you're on the soft snow.
Yeah, exactly. We were at a friend's place. My best friend has got a little ski lodge in Les Arcs in France.
Nice.
And yeah, it's a beautiful little place actually, and it's on the Paradis ski resort, I think. And so I was up there not really knowing what the hell was going on, to be honest, but I knew I quite fancied skiing and I always wanted to do it. And when I was a kid, we didn't have any money, so skiing wasn't an option.
It's
not. Then I got a job in the city.
Really?
No, it's not at all. And then I got a job in the city and I had the money, but I didn't have the time. So unfortunately, by being time poor, I just didn't go skiing. And then I broke my neck and had no arms and legs. So skiing was never an option until I got challenged by Neil, my friend, who said, well, if you can get on a bike and ride for 100 miles, you can definitely get a pair of skis and have a go. Right? So we did. And so that took us up the mountain. And like I say, I'm 6'3" and 100 kilos, like 16 stone. He's half of all of those measurements. And I fell on him for about a week until eventually I was able to do a blue run on my own. So that was really cool. And then I did a couple of runs for the Wings for Life World Run. So if you've not heard of the Wings for Life World Run, check it out, wingsforlifeworldrun.com. Amazing event. It's their flagship event, and it's the only race in the world where the finishing line chases you. So you start running, and then eventually, after half an hour, the catcher car, which represents the finish line, starts, and it comes up behind you. And as it passes you, that's the end of your race. Okay. So the beauty in that is that you can't fail to complete your race, because obviously your race finishes when it finishes.
And then we can see a bit of footage as well, I think, on TV where you fall a little bit, but the people that are running side by side just let you recover yourself and you get back up and you start running again. So you can see your gait is not what it used to be, but you still run. Yeah,
I surprised myself that particular day. That got 250,000 views on LinkedIn. People like to see people fall on their face, obviously. But yeah, it's that particular day for the Wings for Life World Run. That was the first one that I'd ever done. And what an experience. It was incredible. I didn't know if I was going to fall on my face after 2 footsteps. And when you've got 1 million people on Red Bull TV watching, then that's not a good look for anybody, right? But I started running and I didn't fall on my face. And I carried on running, and again, I didn't fall, and I really surprised myself. I wasn't running well, I wasn't running fast, yeah, but I was definitely running. And
is it about running fast? It's about running, though, isn't it?
Well, that was it. I mean, I'd never run a day or at all since my injury, and there I am standing on the start line of a major global race, like the equivalent, like bigger than the London Marathon in terms of numbers. It's huge, and so yeah, so I was really proud to be able to run again, and not only did I feel like I'm blowing smoke up my own backside here, but I carried on running, and I didn't finish until I got to 7K, which was further than my previously, before injury, running distance. I used to do 5Ks normally. I wasn't a massive runner, but I was able to do 5. So to do 7 after injury, having never run since injury, was mind-blowing.
It is. It's amazing. And you're still raising money now, still challenging yourself and other people.
Yes, yeah. So we've done
on you here, which I can see some of the words.
I do this. So this is my Enduro Challenge t-shirt. Enduro Challenge is the newest one. So what seeded Enduro Challenge was I took on what became known as the Isolation Everest Challenge, and I became the first tetraplegic to virtually summit Everest on my stairs at home over lockdown. So 3 and a bit days of walking up and down the stairs in support of another guy who's called Ed Jackson, and Ed Jackson's an ambassador for Wings for Life. Ed had this crazy dream that he wanted to summit Mount Everest on his stairs at home, and he's got a year on me, but so about 3.5 years ago, he dove into the shallow end of a swimming pool and broke his neck. And he's a professional rugby player, immediately lost everything below the neck, so his career included. And in his recovery journey, he's been able to recover enough to be able to stand and walk again, and has actually taken on some mountains, incredibly. His most recent one, I think, was not Mirror Peak. It was one of the other ones. And so he wanted to do this thing where he wants to become the first tetraplegic to summit real Everest. And over COVID, unfortunately, or the lockdown, that wasn't going to happen. So he started climbing his stairs, and I thought I'd join him to help raise some funds and awareness. And
How long did you say it took
he
you?
was doing. It took just over 3 days.
Wow.
So it was 3.5 days.
How long every day were you climbing these stairs?
It was a 12-hour shift. So it was 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 12 hours a day for 3 and a bit days. So yeah, nearly 40 hours in total.
That's a lot.
It really was. It was 9,000 meters of elevation. So we only counted the upstairs. We didn't count the downstairs. Thanks to Ed. I would have happily counted the downstairs, but for distance. But no, he said it's all about elevation. So only up counts, and then you have to go back down again and do it again. So yeah, it was nearly 4,000 flights of stairs. It was just insane. But so I found myself at the top of the stairs, having conquered Everest, having conquered my virtual Everest. And so yeah, that was again an amazing experience, and one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was absolutely incredibly difficult to do. I can't even imagine people without injury being able to do that easily, and it's, oh my word, it's tough. You know, just think about your stairs like a 45-degree angle, right? I mean, you're walking for 3 days up a huge hill. Anyway, so I was talking to a journalist, and she said to me, "So what next?" And I've always had in the back of my mind, apart from the fact the obvious answer to when someone says something like that immediately after having just spent 3 days doing something, I said to myself and to her, I really fancy a rowing challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a rower, but that's kind of like my superpower in a way, because I'm not coming at this with any preconceived ideas. But then I wasn't a mountain climber, and I wasn't a cyclist, and I wasn't a runner or any of those things. So by not being something doesn't mean I can't be that thing. So I sat down with a piece of paper and said, this is just 8 weeks ago, what would be the world's biggest something to do with static rowing? And we kind of built it from there. So it turned out to be Enduro Challenge became the event, and it's going to be the world's biggest fully inclusive live indoor rowing event for charity. So
and what does it entail? How far do you have to row?
It's not a distance thing, it's a time thing. So this is a 4-hour row, which is eye-watering for anyone. But it breaks down into 2 ways. So you've got a macro, which is like a venue-based row, picture like a school or a clubhouse or a gym, where you've got multiple ergs, indoor row machines, multiple ergs in one place, a party atmosphere. Or a micro, where you'll have like a man in his man cave or a woman in a she shed pulling at home, doing their thing. That's the what. Then the how would be, it's either a 4-hour row, and you do it solo because you're a beast and you enjoy doing crazy endurance challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some of those, mostly military. Or you do a crew row where you cut and dice those 4 hours between you, your friends, your family, your colleagues.
Yeah, I think crew sounds very sensible.
I do as well. And I'll be doing it in a crew row too. But so that will happen.
Is it happening pretty soon?
It's 94 days from the day we record this, so it's going to be on February the 6th, 2021. So it's right just after Christmas, and when I say it's the world's biggest, it's happening at the same time around the world, everywhere around the world. So it's 3 p.m. UK time, and then you benchmark from there. So 10 a.m. in New York, 7 a.m. San Francisco, 2 a.m. the next day in Sydney. Poor guys.
Brilliant.
But it's going to be everyone everywhere pulling together, raising money for spinal cord injury research.
It's amazing, isn't it? What they just get bigger and bigger every time you think of something else. To have a global event is fantastic.
Well, with the backdrop of COVID at the moment, that's the thing that really spurred this. I was like, well, at the moment, everyone everywhere is suffering with the same problems. There's fear, there's anxiety, there's isolation, there's all those issues, none of which are good. So how can we build something together that can bring everyone everywhere together at the same moment in time in a global community and do something constructive when good news is in short supply? And rowing is a good medium to do that. So really it's a global community event that uses rowing rather than a rowing event.
And it also gives people a focus as well as breaking that isolation, really, doesn't it? And I think a bit of routine in these days when maybe people aren't working or their jobs have changed or whatever, routine is great. So to have that focus it's going to help a lot of people.
I totally agree, and that routine is important not just for able-bodied people. What's really important here is that this is open to everyone, everywhere, and I really mean that. So that's able-bodied and adapted men, women, and kids. Whether you've got economic, social mobility, or educational issues, or any of that stuff, whoever you are, wherever you are, this is the event for you. So it means that we can all do something together. We can hold hands with the world, you know, all very kumbaya, but we can do something together.
Taking part, is there a website or something?
Yeah, it's very easily endurochallenge.com. So enduro has a W on the end because that's just clever marketing. So yeah, get yourself over to endurochallenge.com. We're going to make it free for the November sign-ups. So if you sign up in November, you won't pay for your ticket. However, it will be £10 thereafter, and that will run up until, as I say, the February event. And there's even a t-shirt opportunity. You can buy one of these clever boys from the merchandising side of the site as well. But what's clever about it as well is outside of your ticket price and any merchandising piece, which we use to run the event, or the funds we use to run the event, 100% of your fundraising, which will be done through Just Giving, goes directly to Wings for Life. And what's clever about that is that 100% of the money they receive goes directly into spinal cord injury research. So there's no charity leakage, as often happens with charities. The only reason that they can say that is that Red Bull, the drinks company, pay 100% of their operating costs very generously as their charity partner. So as a result, if you raise £1 in fundraising, it is £1 of research.
And that's really good to hear, because so many people say, oh, well, I give this and such goes there, but it's brilliant to hear that 100% of it goes to the charity. So
that's why you're doing it, right?
Yeah, we're nearing the end, so I'd like to ask you for any tips. And I know that you have something that you call rope ladders. So can you explain a little bit about rope ladders?
Yes, absolutely. So rope ladders are something that was coined whilst I was in intensive care. It was given to me really by a guy who was my intensive care nurse called Osdean Julien. And Oz was amazing. He was sat at the end of my bed, and whilst I was full of smiles and optimism and all this good stuff, even despite the level of injury that I had, he took me to one side and he said, Steve, all this optimism is fantastic. You'll need it. You'll need every ounce of it. So enjoy it while it's there. But you will have dark times. You will have 4 a.m. moments. You will have those negative spirals where nothing good happens, right? And so you've got to prepare in the good times for what's going to happen in the bad times and know that they will come. And it was the most sage piece of advice that he gave me. So effectively what he said to me was, prepare some of these rope ladders that you can roll down to yourself when you feel like you're going to be spiraling down into a dark place. And they can be past memories that you want to recall and get back to. They can be future memories, because your body doesn't know the difference between past and present memories anyway. So picture something that you want to be in the future and move towards that, something positive. Or alternatively, just be in the moment and just have that honesty with yourself. You know, when you step out of your body and you look down on it, and okay, you're covered in wires and there's machines beeping all over the place, and there's nothing happy happening, but at least you're in a position where you can be honest about that moment rather than allow your mind to catastrophize and run away with it. So I did exactly that. I prepared 3 of my rope ladders, and for me, it was a past memory of my granddaughter. She and I rolling around in the grass together, and that was an incredible. I could feel the weight of her and hear her laughing and stuff, and so that was great. I could use that. But if that wasn't going to work, then this future memory of being able to take that turkey to the Christmas table, which we now have a video of, so it actually did happen, was something I was kind of visualizing in my mind when I needed to. And then the other side of it was exactly as I mentioned, stepping out of my body and just appreciating the scene for the moment, for what it was and what it wasn't, being honest about that with myself. And what I found that by having those rope ladders, it meant that I could throw them down to myself whenever there was a dark time coming. And if I felt myself getting into that spiral, then I had practiced in the good times a skill that I could use in the bad times. So my advice to people would be, get yourself some rope ladders. They're really useful. And what you tend to find is that you don't get into those spirals anywhere near as often as you would do if you didn't have them, for the sheer fact that you know you have them. If you know you can get out of the hole, you don't step in the hole, rather than worry about what you do when you're in the hole. So yeah, it was a really great piece of advice, and it really helped me.
It's a very practical piece of advice that everybody actually can take the time out to do. And I like the idea of Oz just really being realistic with you and being honest, you know, not saying, you know, this is great from now on. Yeah, we all have dark days, but actually we can find some ways to pull ourselves out of them as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to speaking to us today, and wishing you all the best on all your challenges. I'm sure this won't be the last one that we hear of. But looking forward to hearing how this one goes in February. So thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time out.
Fantastic, Madeline. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black.